so excited to talk about the power of positive thinking. But as the darkness precedes the light, I do need to address some negatives before we can get to the positives. We live in a world full of negativity, where really challenging problems exist. In the US, people are homeless and hungry. College tuition is really expensive. Sexual assault happens far too frequently, and there's oppression of race and religion. There's a stigma against those experiencing physical and mental disabilities. People can still be legally discriminated against because of their sexual identity. Gender inequality is rampant, and people die every day waiting for blood and organ donations. The list goes on, and it's really hard to imagine, in a world filled with all of these terrible things, how anyone can avoid depression or hopelessness, especially considering the contagious nature of negativity. One of the most common misconceptions about positive thinking is that it avoids all of the negatives and thus becomes unrealistic. And it would be unrealistic to pretend that all of those problems don't exist or to assume that a positive attitude can solve them all. However, a positive attitude can be an essential stepping stone in developing the ambition needed to tackle some of these seemingly impossible issues. When everyone seems to be giving up and a situation seems so hopeless, a positive attitude can be a driving force for change. But that change is only possible with the belief that things can and will get better. Life is hard, and really bad things do happen to good people, but life can also be good. One of my favorite quotes is, "Choose to have a good day." And what this means to me is that positive thinking is a choice. So when I wake up in the morning, I have the ability to put on a positive attitude and then carry that energy with me wherever I go. And this doesn't mean that I have an endless supply of energy and ungrounded happiness and rainbows and butterflies all the time. However, it's more about focusing my energy on the good things rather than the not so good things. And when it comes down to it, you do have to recognize the lows to be able to appreciate the highs. And although you can't control the things that happen to you, it's really essential to control the ability in which you respond to those things. So about a month ago, I was up north with a dozen of my closest friends, and we had finally arrived safely to my cabin despite snow-packed roads and really violent winds and temperatures that were hovering around -25. And upon unpacking, we realized that we had forgotten some of the most essential groceries that we needed to survive the snowpocalypse of a weekend. So we had to trek back out into the blizzard to the local convenience store 15 minutes away. And on the way home, a magical fairy plopped these huge snow piles into the middle of my lane. And before I saw them, one grabbed my tire and sent me spinning in these really miserable circles until I crashed up against a snowbank on the side of the road. We were shaken, but we were fine, and upon realizing that we were hopelessly stuck in a ditch, we had to call for a tow. So we waited for what seemed like eternity for the tow truck driver to get there, and the truck itself was really scary, and the man driving the truck was even scarier. He did manage to pull us out of the ditch, but the problems continued because he told us that my spare tire had been frozen to the bottom of my car. So it was a late Saturday afternoon and no auto shops were open, so the only solution that he had for us was to tow us all the way back to his home 30 minutes away. So we get there and we're sitting in the middle of this huge field, shivering, literally plotting out an escape route in case this man turns out to be a serial killer. We do realize that we were being dramatic, but 3.5 hours later, after our quick trip to the store, we were finally on our way back to the cabin with a spare tire that had to be blowtorched off of the bottom of my car. So obviously that's a really bad situation, right? Nobody would want that to happen to them. But it took a positive attitude to be able to see some good things that happened that afternoon as well. So while we were waiting in that ditch, we were fortunate for quite a few things. We had successfully missed the tree that was right behind my car. We had our cell phones in service to call for a tow, and it was only going to take 30 minutes for that tow truck driver to get there. While we were waiting, there were 7 different cars who stopped alongside of this desolate road in small-town northern Michigan to check on us and see if we were okay. I also had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with a close friend. Nothing says bonding experience like being trapped in a ditch together. And despite our snap judgment about the man's appearance, the tow truck driver was one of the most persistent people that I've ever met. Because yes, it was freezing outside, and this poor man had snot icicles coming from his face. But he didn't give up, and he went above and beyond his job expectations to get us back on the road safely. So there are 2 distinct frames in which to view this story. And had I immersed myself in all of the negatives, I would have missed the opportunity to see the positives. And that doesn't mean that the bad things don't exist, because I did have over $4,000 worth of damage to my car, and I didn't get it back until last week. But being able to pull out these good things is what allowed me to laugh and smile while it was happening and look back on it with a little bit better of an attitude. I couldn't control the things that were happening to me, but I did have the ability to control the way in which I responded to those things. And it did take choosing to have a good day to be able to shift my perception and see the story that way. So the question then becomes how to choose to have a good day. And like anything else, it takes practice and occasionally a fake it till you make it kind of mindset. Positive psychology is the scientific study of what makes life worth living. So there's a lot of research evidence to support positive psychological interventions. So things like mindfulness and acts of kindness, gratitude journals, and writing down what went well every day. And there were 2 separate meta-analyses that were conducted to test the effectiveness of those interventions. And I won't bore you with the long titles because the idea is pretty simple. These kinds of interventions improved well-being and decreased depressive symptoms. And this wasn't just for people who had a clinical diagnosis. This was for anyone who decided to practice these interventions. So it can be valuable no matter who you are. So one of these that resonates really well with me, similar to what went well, are good vibes. So Natalie, who's one of the most positive and grateful people that I've ever met, introduced a good vibes jar at our workplace. And this is where people can write down a quick little one-liner about something happened during their shift, and then at the end of the week, they're typed up and emailed out to the team. She encouraged me to start them at the residence hall where I work, as well as a camp that I was at over the summer, and they were so successful, and we had so many people participating. And I'll show you a few examples of some of the great things that we saw. And then naturally, gratitude does get pulled into these as well. I'll read this one out because the handwriting's a little bit rough, but I'm thankful for the guy who drives the Airbus and unloads the bags. So yes, good vibes are to celebrate the really wonderful things that happen in a given day, but they're also to appreciate the smaller things that are easily overlooked. And I'm going to show some examples from the camp that I was at over the summer. They're also in chicken scratch handwriting, so I'll read them off, but it's a little bit more understandable because cute little kiddos wrote them. Tie-dyeing made me feel colorful. And just being here makes me happy. And then the last one that I'll show, contrary to popular belief, I did not write. So it's really, really great to see all the wonderful things that are happening in people's lives, and it's such a nice way to start spreading positivity. So Natalie was my leader in positive thinking, because not only does she embody positive thought, but she provides everyone around her with the opportunity to pass it on to other communities. And that's what positive thinking needs to be. It needs to be a movement, and it starts here with the leaders and best. Yes, bad things do happen, and life can be hard. And to reference one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning, someone in the US needs blood every 2 seconds, and people die every day waiting for organ donations. This seems like a really, really tough problem to tackle. And it took 2 fantastic women who work in the transplant center here to use their frustrations with this issue to drive forward a change. So they used their positive attitudes and created an organization called Wolverines for Life that works on promoting life-saving donation. And over the last 4 years, although this problem is so hard to solve, they've been able to save over thousands and thousands of lives that wouldn't have otherwise been saved. And this is just one example of how a positive attitude can really make a difference. So what I encourage you to do is reflect on your day. Think about the best part of your day, something that made you smile, or something that you're excited about, and write it down on the good vibes wall that's out in the lobby. And then my challenge to you is to continue seeking out the good vibes in every day, and then pass those on to others. The easiest way to do this is by choosing to have a good day. Thank you.